Okay.
All right, I think we're live on both.
We are. We're here.
Perfect. Well, we are not Taka and Natalie.
Surprise.
We stole their accounts, and they're letting us go live. Yeah, this will be great.
Let's jump right in.
Okay, so we are not Taka and Natalie. Pretty obvious. But they asked us if we would take their coffee talk time. And so we're actually really excited because we're going to talk about something that we feel like in our short time living on this earth, we kind of know a little bit about. And I know that kind of sounds presumptuous at first, but as we get into this, hopefully you guys will understand a little bit more where we're coming from. So today we are going to talk about this concept and idea about living in transition.
Yes. So we've got a couple of questions that we have lined up. There's like not enough room here.
I know, right?
We have a couple of questions that we have lined up just to kind of outline the conversation because we want this to be a conversation.
Yeah.
We don't want it to be a preaching moment or anything like that. We imagine we're sitting in a room full of our friends just talking about how frustrating it is to live in transition. Oh my gosh. And how to get through that and how to really lean in and be faithful and give God your best in the middle of feeling like you're not being given the best, or you're frustrated or overwhelmed or you're not where you want to be, anything like that. So we're jumping in and starting off with the big question. What does it mean to live in transition?
So when we started talking about what we were going to talk about today, really this is kind of a glaring thing for Tiffany and I. So for those of you guys who know us, you guys know that we've gone through quite a bit of transition just in our short, almost 10 years of
and
marriage.
we'll cover a little bit of it in a minute.
But I heard this saying once that there's 3 constants in our life: God, taxes, and change. And so I really believe that. And transition is just a fancy word for change. Like, we're always going to be coming up against and facing some sort of change. Obviously, COVID-19, no one expected it. But it's a transition for a lot of people in a lot of different ways. And so we just have felt that this whole concept of living in transition, there is beauty in it. There is struggle in it. What does it look like for people? What are some of the things that... as we continue, we're going to talk about, what are some of the struggles about transition? What are some of the beautiful things about transition? But we really do think that this whole concept and idea about living in this transitional state, whether you find yourself in that right now or you've experienced it in the past, and some of you, especially if you're in college, high school, you're going to have a lot more transition coming your way as time goes on. But for us, man, we just really believe that you can live in transition really well, and it's taken us a lot of trial and error and learning experiences to get to a place where we feel confident in it, at least.
And there's so many different facets of transition, so it's not just... We're going to tell a little bit of our story and the kind of transition that we've been through, but it's applicable to high school to college, or young adult to deciding your career, or waiting for marriage. Your kids being at a certain age and waiting for that next season to come, waiting for that next growth spurt, that next level of coherence to happen. So transition isn't just applicable to our specific situation. It kind of transcends all of that and can be molded into what you're experiencing in your life. But I think there's general rules of transition that apply.
Well, I think about the story of Joseph in the Bible, right? Like, for me, his story is one full of transitions. So if you've never read the story of Joseph, go into Genesis and read it. It's a crazy story. But Joseph goes from being a teenager, getting this dream and this vision about what his future is going to look like, right? Like, his family is going to worship him and serve him. And then he goes from having this awesome, like, aha moment, like, this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life, and I'm excited, and he almost, like, gets a little braggy about it. But then it goes to him getting sold into slavery, and he's in slavery for years. Then he gets thrown into prison, and, like, he just goes through a bunch of different things. Years pass by, decades pass by, and then he finally steps into his dream and what he felt like he was supposed to do. And so I just think that we all go through this season of transition. And so with that, we wanted to share with you guys a little bit about our experience about transition. So for us, it's going to seem a little weird because I'm like going to ask my wife who's sitting next to me, babe, what has been your experience with transition? Would you share with the people here a little bit about it?
So the question is, what's our experience with transition? And we'll talk about it from our different perspectives, but a little bit of our experience with transition and living in transition. So Mike and I went to ministry school straight after high school, and believed even in that season of life, so from 19 to 22 ish.
I mean, I was 18, but
is it 18
I mean?
to 22? We felt called to full-time ministry.
Yeah.
We started working towards that. So we graduated. We just started pursuing that dream. So rewinding all the way back to 18, 19 years old and feeling passionate about this dream, about wanting to do ministry and serve and live your life, like just sharing Jesus with people. And then real life hit. We ended up getting jobs, just jobs, like anybody has to get. I worked at David's Bridal. Mike worked at Starbucks. We just keep going back to Starbucks.
Yeah, love Starbucks. It's great.
I worked at David's Bridal. Mike worked at Starbucks. And we did that for about 10 months and continued to dream about full-time ministry.
Yeah.
Believing that was still very much so our calling.
Yeah.
We ended up moving to Marinette, Wisconsin and serving at an amazing church up there for a couple of years. And in that season, still feeling that pull and that draw to full-time ministry, but we had chosen a church plant to be a part of. And so full-time ministry is not really like a thing with a church plant. It's bivocational, almost always. And so we had worked bivocational. I had the opportunity of being their children's pastor. We served with the youth. We did just a small group, all this stuff. But we were still in transition. We were still dreaming of what life could be like, full-time ministry. And then after that, and we've moved like a bunch of times in here. We've moved back and forth to Rockford. We've moved around in Rockford. We've just moved a lot. After that, we took an interim position, which is in itself a transition position. We took an interim position as lead pastors of a church.
At 24 years old.
In Wisconsin at 24. And had our first small taste of full-time ministry. Yeah. But very much so still in transition because it wasn't our church. It wasn't going to be our church. Yeah. We were helping them through a difficult season. So that whole experience was transition. It was taking them from what they had been left with and bringing them to something new. Yeah. Then we left. And we moved down to Rockford and we started working with Focus One, now CFLC. And we had Banner almost right away after we moved. It was our first experience of having kids away from family. It was our first experience of us working in different areas of ministry. It was our first experience with post-high school ministry. So all of that was new. And we were learning how to transition. We were learning how to get our footing in a completely new environment, a new city, a new job, a new season of life. And 2 short years after we did that, we stopped working for the program and went back to Starbucks. Yeah. And tried to figure out what full-time ministry looked like while we were both working at Starbucks.
And I would even say it wasn't even about necessarily full-time ministry. It was just about the dream that God had planted in our heart to do ministry and to give it everything we had. And every single step along the way, and this is the hard part, every single step along the way, we felt like it was the right decision. Right. We felt like, man, it was a prayerful decision. We fasted for it. Like we weren't just making these flippant decisions, and we weren't just discontent with where we were. We really believe that each season had its purpose, and I think that is one of the hardest things to feel is you feel purpose in what you're doing, but yet frustrated with where you're at. Yeah. And I don't know if you guys have ever felt that way. You felt purpose in what you're doing. You've seen the one person that maybe you're like, man, I really feel connected with this person. I really feel like I'm in their life for a reason. Or maybe you're like, no, this job is really putting me in a financial position to get rid of my debt, to handle all the things I need to handle as an adult. you feel purpose in what you're doing, but yet there's frustration with where you're at because it's not exactly where you want to be. Yeah. And I keep coming back to this idea of Joseph because I could just see him in those moments of knowing that there's purpose serving Potiphar, knowing that there's purpose of gaining all that knowledge of how to take inventory and run an entire, small kingdom within a kingdom, because Potiphar was like second in command to Pharaoh. So he was in charge of a lot of stuff. So there was purpose in what he was doing, but he had to be frustrated that he was still in slavery. Yeah. And so that's the kind of transition that we're talking about, is feeling and knowing that there's purpose in what you're doing. Yep. But being frustrated because you're not where you want to be, or not being where you should be. Could be. Right. All of that stuff.
Yeah. So really quick before we move on to the next part, we've finished up our time in Rockford working at Starbucks, and we moved out to California to help with a church plant. So now that's where we are in California, helping with Voice Church. But even coming out here, this being our stage of life right now that we're currently in, we knew that this was almost 100% another season of transition. Yeah. Because we believed that God was going to call us to plant our own church. And so although Voice is our church, it is not what we believe God promised us as an end result. And so we knew saying yes to this was going to be saying yes to another season of transition. And that was hard to say yes to, because I think at that point we were ready. Even though we weren't ready, we were ready to settle and just say, this is enough. Like, I'm tired of transition. Yeah. I want to plant somewhere. I want to root somewhere, and I want it to be my home. I want my kids to have home, So, yeah. And it's just been 10 years almost. Yeah. Of transition.
And the thing about this too, for me, in my perspective, is there's been a lot of feelings of, again, purpose and frustration, but also like calling and just questions all the time of like, how
are you jumping into our next question?
Yeah. So
I'm gonna ask Mike a question. He's gonna answer it. You ready? So personally, what has been the hardest part about living through transition?
Yeah, and so the hardest part about living in transition would be that part of, like, for me anyway, I'll just, for me, is identity and what you're doing, like who you are and what you're doing. Yeah. Because for a long time, and even now, I still believe that I am and can be and will be something, but a lot of times what you do can play a lot of mind games with that. So for me, in the 10 years that we've been in ministry, I have done 3 years full time. So 7 years out of the 10 that we've been together, I've been bivocational the entire time. Yeah. So that's 40 plus hours working at some other job on top of doing some sort of full-time ministry, something. Yeah. And so that's just been really difficult, because you have this dream, you have this vision, and then all of a sudden it gets inundated with real life, and there's things you have to do, like bills you have to pay. There's things you just have to take care of, like a family, right? And so for me, I think the hardest part about the season of transition is identity. Because for a lot of us, for me, what I did was who I was. And so when it's so all over the place, when transition just brings you from here to there to this to that, you kind of get caught up in that, in your own identity of like, well, then who am I? Mm-hmm. I remember after moving here, I was working 2 jobs and involved with trying to be as much as involved with Voice as I could be, because that's why we're here. And I remember I was sitting, I had my Bible, I had my Chase name tag, because I was working at Chase at the time, and I had my my Bardot name tag, and Bardot is like this local coffee shop. I just love coffee, guys. I can't get away from it. Okay, like I just love coffee. Okay,
Starbucks,
so
Bardot,
yeah, it doesn't whatever Zingers, yep, all that stuff. But I had my Bible, I had my Chase name tag, and my Bardot name tag, and I just started looking at it, and I took a picture of it, and it's in my notes, and I just said, Lord, who am I? Yeah. Because in the middle of all this transition, I was so struggling. The hardest part for me was, who is Mike Orta? Am I a pastor, preacher, follower of Jesus? Am I a banker? Am I a guy who pulls a barista, like guys who pulls really good shots? Like really. But the thing about it is, the more I'm learning, yes to all. And I think for Joseph too, I always come back to him, man, is like, was he this, gonna be someone that his family served? Yes. Was he in slavery? Yes. Like, none of that changed any of who he was supposed to be.
Yeah.
And I really believe that Joseph, in the midst of all that, the middle of all his transitions that he faced, was like, I'm going to be who I am no matter, irregardless of the circumstance that I'm in. And so I think, I think for me the hardest part about transition is the identity piece of really understanding who you are, and how you deal with that in the midst of not really being settled where you are.
Yeah.
Tiffany, what has been the hardest part for you?
The hardest part about transition for me, I consider myself a pretty adaptable person.
Mm-hmm.
I think I just am hardwired to kind of adjust and shift. But in the midst of that, being a 9 on the Enneagram, there is a lot happening internally when we go through transition. And so there will be moments of feeling peace and rested when I feel like I've just gotten settled and I'm like, okay, this is okay. But what's happening inside is I'm trying to find a constant. I'm trying to find a rhythm. I'm trying to find a base. And a lot of the times you don't get that in transition. Everything's kind of all over the place. It feels like you can't really find your footing. It feels like you can't really get a steady walk or a steady pace going because there's always something different to adjust to. Like, I think about it in terms of walking on kind of like an uneven sidewalk. When you're trying to get like a good jog going, but you're constantly having to move around different things and different instabilities, it's frustrating. And so one of the hardest things for me is finding that stability and finding that that consistent piece that I can trust and lean on when I feel like finances aren't there and it's disconcerting. You're like, we don't have enough money for this. When you feel like your kids aren't at peace because they just had to leave their group of friends and there's stuff happening inside of them that you can't control, when you feel like you can't help your spouse through what's going on, when you feel like you have no control over a job situation, and then on top of it to add not having control over what's happening inside of you. I think once you've lost all of that control in the midst of transition, it's hard to find your footing. It's hard to find your stability. And so through all of the seasons of transition, I think every time the hardest part for me is finding that stability, because there doesn't seem to be any. You kind of feel like you're floating, but I believe each time God has met me there and has brought me to a place of having peace in the midst of that, and just being okay with it being wonky and weird, and using that adaptable nature to kind of go, all right, this is the path we're running on. I wanted to run on smooth sidewalk, but I guess we're doing trails in the woods.
And some of y'all like that trail running stuff. Like, some of y'all really dig the uneven stuff. Put me on the treadmill where it's not going to change and I know exactly what I'm getting. But that's the thing though, man. It is a tough season to be in, and again, I think transition is something that every single person, whether you've experienced it yet or not, you're going to. Like, it's just something. Change is going to happen. You'll get a job, a new job. You'll maybe change cities. Maybe you'll go. You'll change churches. You'll have kids. You'll grow up yourself. Like, there's always going to be transition happening. And I think it's good to acknowledge the difficulties that come with it, because then it just puts you in an honest perspective and an honest place. So not just yourself, but even too with God. Like, you have to be able to get to a place where you transition may not make sense, but you got to make sense of it. You know what I mean? Like, for you, it may not make sense. Like, how is this going to lead into this? But it will make sense to you, for you, where you're at right now, if you choose to take a broader, like an aerial view and see it for what it is, not necessarily for what it's gonna be, but for what it is now. Which leads us into the next thing. Is we talked about a lot of the difficulties with transition. But going through it, I mean, literally, guys. So again, to recap time frame: married at 21, living in Rockford, 7 months, transitioned into moving 4 hours away to northern Wisconsin, living there for about 3 years, transitioning from one church there to another church, leading that church for a year, then moving again back to Rockford, 4 hours south, to be a part of another church for two more years. Then going from that job to working total secular jobs, to then going from there to moving across the country to Southern California to be a part of another church plant for what will be 3 years by the time we're done here. So we understand transition, and we understand with a lot of that. We were making no money in Rockford to then going to Southern California to make even less money where it's even more expensive. So like we understand transition, and we understand there's so many difficulties that can come with it. However, there are legitimately beautiful things about transition if you choose to see them. Yeah. And for me, I think one of the coolest things that has come for our family in the midst of transition is contentment. I will put money that our family, and this isn't to be extremely braggy, but our family is probably one of the most content families, simply because, and not because we had to make, not because we made all the right decisions, or because we're super spiritual. That's our son wanting a granola bar. But
he runs off of these.
Yeah, this is his fuel. But not because we made all the right decisions, or because we're super spiritual, or because we're just awesome. We've been forced into contentment. Yep. We have been forced into positions and places that have made us really evaluate the needs from the wants. Mm-hmm. And as people as Americans living in America, that's a very fine line for some people, about, I need this. Do you really though? Or do you want it really bad? And are you really trying hard to justify it? We've had to live simplistic for a really long time now. And
it's been good.
It's been great. It's been hard, but it's been great. And it's been hard when you see the person younger than you getting what you've wanted sooner than you've gotten it. It's really hard when you see every single person around you flaunting their new thing that you have wanted for so long, and you just simply cannot have it. You can't finagle your way into it. Yeah. You can't sell enough things to get it, and you literally, and trust me, have tried. And but you are just forced to be content with what you have. Yeah. And it has honestly made our family so much stronger, so much more tight knit, and we have gotten to experience legitimate joy with not having much. And I don't want to make that sound like a sob story. Trust me, we're fine. Yeah. But you do kind of, especially here in Southern California, it's a totally different ballgame out here, man. I remember we were driving, I was going to work at Starbucks in Newport Beach, and every time I'd pull we were driving my Lamborghini, and it had rust and stuff on the side because it's from the Midwest, and people don't know what rust is here. And so it's we had rust on it and whatever. And I remember, no joke, I remember driving in the parking lot one time, and I was parallel parking my Lamborghini, and I backed in between Lamborghini and the brand, new Tesla that just I don't know what it is, but it was really flashy looking Tesla. And I remember getting out of my car and hitting the alarm on my car, and literally the owner of the Tesla just looked at me funny, you're locking that? Seriously? And it's
it has my stuff in it.
It has my stuff in it, bro. But all that to say, it's really easy in areas like this, in situations and seasons like this, to compare. But I think the thing that transition for us has done, when we've really taken an aerial view and looked at what it is right now, not what we hope it can turn into or whatever, not comparing our situation to anybody else's, but what it is right now, it's really got us into a season or a stage of life where we are just content. Yeah. And so we're able to be God, whatever, whenever, however, man, we are just okay, again, forcefully now. We're not that great in and of ourselves, but we have been forced to be in a place where it's okay, God, we're good. With whatever you got, we're good. Yeah.
For me, the biggest blessing that has come through seasons of transition, I believe that the biggest blessing for me personally has been just kind of an abandonment, not just with my dreams and my goals and aspirations for me personally, but in my daily life. I like to be in control. I like to have things just the way that I like them. It has been so far from that for such a long time that I feel like I just don't even care anymore. I'm whatever, do whatever, whatever. But there's a beauty in walking into each day and just going, all right.
We have
God, what do you want?
We have a saying with Isla, because Isla's in the stage right now where like she has to control everything, like everything, and so literally we'll sit her down and say, Isla, I do not have to be in control. And so and that has come, and I had to have a sit down with her the other day and tell her, I'm like, baby, if you can master this now, your life is going to be so much better, because I've seen so many people hold on to something so tightly that God has been like, if you would just let that go, I got something so much better for you. Yeah. But it's like that old adage story of like the monkey who reaches his hand in for the cookie and like gets his hand in, but because he won't let go of the cookie, he can't get out, so he trapped himself. If all he would do is just let go of the cookie, he could be free. But it's like we so badly want the thing that we want right now that we're not willing to just let go of control a little bit to see the beauty and the freedom that actually comes from that.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly it. I think I've found myself in that situation too many times where I'm trapped and I'm stuck, and it's all because of what's happening up here. Mm-hmm. It's all because of what I've convinced myself of, or what I've convinced myself that I deserve or should have, or the season of life that I should be in. You're ridiculous. I've convinced myself of something, and it makes me feel like I'm lacking. Like I don't have enough. Wow. And when I let go of that, and when I take that aerial view and I go, God, what do I actually have? Yeah. What do I actually need? You can see how He's provided every single thing, always. And that you're not actually lacking anything. Yeah. So one of the things that it has taught us, one, is to focus more on God's provision. Mm-hmm. Because even though we'd have moments where we were down to $5 in our bank account, and we've got Mother's Day and birthdays are coming and all this stuff, and we want to celebrate and love our people, and we're like, I can't. I actually can't. Because
we're not talking like balling on a budget. We're talking about like balling on a buck. Like
because of our budget.
Right. Like it's.
Yeah, I think in that moment you can either trap yourself into that mindset of, I don't have enough, and poor me, and I'm not gonna acknowledge that these things are coming because I don't want people to see the season that I'm in. I don't want them to feel bad for me or feel pity for me or whatever, so I'm just gonna send a little Happy Mother's Day from your less than wealthy child. Mm-hmm. I'm not gonna do that. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take what I do have, and I'm going to celebrate the best that I can. Yeah. Because God has given us something. Yeah. He's given us something. And if we can do something with it, we're better off for it. Yeah. And letting go of that and really acknowledging what God has provided for us has put us in a better position to be grateful. Yeah. So one of the things in the midst of one of those moments, one of those $5 left in the bank account moments, I did the only thing I knew how to do, and I made a conscious shift in prayer time with the kids at night. And so instead of skimming past, the thank yous, because I didn't feel like saying thank you for anything, because I was like, for what? What I did was we started saying, thank you for providing for everything that we need. Yeah. Jesus, thank you for providing for everything that we need, because it was true. Yeah. Thank you for providing for everything that we need. We may not have the things that we want. We may not have the things that we are hoping for. We may not have the things that we think we deserve, but we have everything that we need, and we're grateful for it. Yeah. So in seasons of transition, in the midst of all of it, I think it has shifted our heart to be grateful for very little. Yeah. And it's gotten us out of that expectant mindset. Like, I've done, so I expect. And so now, instead of doing things for what's on the other side of it, you do it because it's the faithful thing to do. Yeah. Yeah. You do it because it's the right thing to do. You feel compelled to do it. You don't do it to get rewarded. Yeah. And it's shifted our whole family. And now we have the opportunity to instill that in our kids, and hopefully they learn it faster than we did. Yeah. So with all that being said, as we kind of like wrap up this little TED Talk on transition,
a little coffee talk,
we wanted to like kind of tie it up with a neat little bow as best we can, because transition is gritty and it's kind of yucky and like hard,
and it's individualistic
and it's
too.
different
Like
for everybody.
It's different for everybody, and you could even be in the same household and it can still be different. Like I remember
our experiences have been different,
so different. I've come through it, you know, with smelling like roses. You on the other hand have kind of no, but I remember one time looking. Tiffany was having a hard time in the kitchen, and in the midst of one of our transitions, I can't honestly tell you which one, but she was overwhelmed, emotional, and I remember sitting there thinking, man, this is my wife, and she's having her completely own journey in this season that we're in, completely separate from mine. Like, I'm going through my own thing and she's going through hers, but what it does is it allows you to see things that you don't normally see, you know what I mean? So but we wanted to leave you guys with a couple things that we really feel like if you
like basic transition principles.
Yeah, tips and tricks, if you will. So number one would be
so the first thing, when we sat down and talked about what we think would be beneficial to share with people about transition, we talked about mental inventory. So if you find yourself in a season of transition, when you find yourself in a season of transition, because it's going to happen if it hasn't already happened a million times already, mental inventory, one of the greatest tools that I have had has been to acknowledge what is happening in my own mind. And sometimes it needs to be vocalized to somebody else. Sometimes it needs to be walked through with someone that has a different perspective than me. Sometimes I just need to acknowledge my own shortcomings, because I can remember in a moment of total honesty, I was on social media and I saw that some of my best friends, like my best friends, had just bought a house, and all I wanted was to be excited for them. That's all I wanted, like deep in my heart. I was like, I want to text them, I want to celebrate, I want to show up, like let's housewarm, whatever. But all that was coming up was anger. All that was coming up was bitterness and frustration. Why do you have 4 bedrooms and a yard and I have 1 bedroom and 4 people? Like, why do you have and I don't? So acknowledging that, the inventory that was in my brain, and following it to its root. The root was that I was struggling with my own life situation. I wasn't mad at them for getting a house. I was excited for them. I was struggling with where God had me, and I had to deal with that. And take that to God. There's been so many things that have popped up, and I've just had to grab it and go, what is that doing here? You know, when I worked at David's Bridal, I would take inventory of everything in the back, and there was some stuff that brides would buy and then they'd never pick it up. And I'd go through and be like, what is this doing here? It doesn't belong here. It belongs to someone else. It doesn't belong to David's Bridal anymore. I have had to do that in my own mind and go, this doesn't belong here. It doesn't belong to me. This isn't mine to keep. I have to let it go. So as you find yourself in transition, whatever your expectancy is, whatever you think you should have in that moment, take some inventory of what's going on in your mind. Figure out what that bitterness is rooted in, what that frustration is rooted in, what that like expectancy is rooted in. Take inventory and go, where did that come from? Does that even belong to me anymore? Should I even give that time and attention, or do I need to throw that out?
For me, so number 2, the thing I think that is probably most important is, what does God say? Like, what is God saying about your whole situation? So we were in a moment here in Southern California when things were just really hard. Things were just really difficult. We were really low on money. We were in one room just because that's what it is here in Southern California, man. Like, they charge you an arm and a leg just to, you know, for a tiny little space. So the thing is, I remember we were having a conversation, and it was about a couple weeks before we launched, and we were in our room both crying, because it was just hard. Like, it was just difficult. And I asked Tiffany a question. I said, what do? Do we go back to Wisconsin? And it was literally every bit of a 5-second murmur, because we both knew God called us here.
Yeah.
Period. Didn't matter the circumstance, what it looked like on the outside. Didn't matter what we were feeling on the inside. God called us here.
Yeah.
This is what we know is true. So regardless of what's going on around us and even inside of us, this is what we're doing. And that's, for those of you guys who don't have a relationship with God, because I understand that could be real for you. Man, I would challenge you. Things, it's hard because for me, I've always had friends be like, dude, my life's fine and I don't have Jesus in my life. And that's fine. Like, that's cool. That's not what I'm getting at. But what I am saying is you need something to draw you back to a true north. You need something to draw you back to a constant and something to gauge what it is that you are doing. And so for us, our gauge has always been, what has God said? Because for us, things are just gonna happen. Things are gonna get difficult. Life is hard. Like, it's just a reality of life. And so for us, how we've always found ourselves to be okay is because we have always strived hard to, regardless of what we feel inside, make sure that we are doing what God wants us to do. So, what is God asking you to do? Is he asking you to be in the situation that you're in? Is he asking you to leave the situation that you're in? So, what is it that God is saying? So, for me, sorry, I'm trying to really focus right now. Our son is talking in the background. But yeah, what is God asking you to do?
Ask Kayak.
So that's that. Sorry guys, it's just super. But you know what? Transition, right? Transition, change. This is what it is.
Sorry, he really wants to drink the juice out of an orange.
Out of an orange with a straw.
So good luck. Good luck.
Salute to you, Banner. But no.
But I think the beauty of saying, what does God say, is even when we were in the frustrating moment, we don't have enough money, we don't have enough space, we don't have enough time, we don't have enough. What did God say? Yeah. He said, be here. Yeah. And so, regardless of money, regardless of time, regardless of resources, he said to be here, which means at some level, he's going to provide the answer for all of those things. Yeah. And so, when you take that inventory, when you give it to God and go, what do you say about it? He reminds you of why you're in that situation. We weren't in one room in someone else's house because we had made a bunch of mistakes or whatever. I mean, even if you did, we weren't there because life had just dealt us a rough hand. We were there because we were doing what we could to be faithful, and that meant making sacrifices. So if you find yourself in that season of transition, a season of lack, a season of wanting more, and you're in the working process, you're in the journey process, you have to remember what brought you to that moment. And so instead of looking at it as a pity, poor me kind of moment, you're going, I'm making a sacrifice for a greater purpose. I'm doing something. Yeah. It may not look like much to anybody else, but I'm doing something. I'm cultivating a character inside of myself. I'm cultivating something inside of my family. I'm building something bigger than what this moment is. And so I'll have my moment. I don't like this. Yeah. It's hard. I want to move past it, but I can't. And so, God, show me what you're building. So when you present it to him, I think you kind of get back to that, like, what's really happening? What is God really calling out of you? And you're able to see what he says about that. So take a mental inventory. What is God saying? What is God saying? And then the last thing is, you're not gonna like this one. Because it's not sexy and it's not glamorous, but it's just do it. Like daily grind. Ask anyone who's successful in anything they do, and successful is relative, but ask anyone who's finding fulfillment in what they're doing. They're gonna tell you it's hard work. It is a grind. It is doing the stuff that no one else is willing to do when no one else is willing to do it. Like, it's constantly making the right decision when no one else is looking. It's constantly pouring yourself into everything. Like, again, back to Joseph. There was a phrase in the story. Read it. It's awesome. But in every situation he was in, with Potiphar, with Pharaoh, it literally says a couple times, everything Joseph did, God blessed. It did not say Joseph did everything. Right. It says everything he did, God blessed. And I really resonate with that, because living in so many seasons of transition, having to be bivocational and like just taking on responsibilities as they come,
I can't do everything. You cannot do everything. You shouldn't do everything. No one wants me singing on the worship team. It's not a win for anybody. So you can't do everything.
Yeah.
You don't want to see a website I would create. It would be awful. But you can't do everything. But everything you can do, like everything that you should be doing, do it with everything you got. Every single chance you have. Because it's cultivating that muscle of like, irregardless of where I'm at, you ever heard the old thing like dress for the job you want, not for the job you have, or whatever? But it's like, man,
think for the season you want, not for the season you're in.
But it's like, man, like live for who you want to be.
Yeah.
Like live for who you know you're called to be. Because I can promise you, there's been seasons in the transitions that we've had where I've reached the dream. Like, I wanted to be a lead pastor. I got that opportunity at the age of 24. Can I just tell you, it wasn't cracked up to what I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
And this is the thing. When your expectation about your destination, little Stephen Furtick, but when your expectation about your destination isn't, like, it doesn't meet up, if you're not rooted in you have a clear mental space of what you're going through, who you are, and what you need to have happen. Also, if you don't have a clear picture of what God has said to you, it's going to cause a world of hurt. Because you're going to be left in this, well, this isn't what I thought it was going to be, so now what?
Yeah.
But in that, constantly making the right decision every single day. Like the daily grind of, man, this is what I know I need to do right now, in this season, in this situation, so I'm going to do it with everything I got. And with the dream in mind, yes, but with your reality at the forefront right now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it's taken that, it has never been one moment of going, this is what we're going to do, and let's do it. And then the roller coaster just took us. Yeah. It has been waking up every day and remembering what's the goal. Yeah. What's the dream? What's in our hearts? What's God calling us to do? What is he asking us to commit to? What are we sacrificing in light of that? And being okay every day with what that actually looks like. Yeah. Being okay with the fact that it is going to put our family through seasons that we have never experienced. I was born and raised in the same house my entire life. I have moved more in the past 10 years than I did my whole life up until 18. I don't know how to do any of this, but I really believe that daily grind, that waking up and going, God, I don't know. Yeah. I have no idea, but I believe you're leading me. Yeah. So what do you say? And what's going on up here? And how can I keep committing to you? How can I keep being faithful to what you've asked me to do? Yeah. And even when faithfulness looks like nothing much at all, when faithfulness looks like a garage film setup, it doesn't look like much to anybody. Yeah. But I know that that's what God has asked me to do. And so that's what I have to be faithful with. Faithfulness looks like raising my kids and being the person that's in other people's corners. It is not going to look glamorous and amazing via social media. It's just not. But I know that it's what God has asked me to do. Yeah. And so when I get through my mental inventory, when I submit it to God and I go, these are the things that I feel like do not belong to me, and I need you to speak truth to that. Yeah. And I need to know what your word says about that. And then when I get up each morning and I go, this is my lot, this is my life, this is my daily grind, and I have to be faithful with it. That is when that's where I find my footing. Yeah. In the midst of transition, when everything else is swirling around me. If I can manage those three things every day, it's constant all the time. Yep. I can find my footing, I can find my base, because I know that I am focused on the Lord. I know that I am dealing with the things that are in my mental space that don't belong there. Yeah. And it makes room for healthy mentalities. Yeah.
And it just makes you enjoy the journey, man. Yeah. It really does. Like,
because I don't think, we were talking about this a little bit earlier, I don't think you can find joy in the end result if you haven't found a way to be joyful in the journey. Yeah. If you can be joyful in the journey and really find a way to enjoy the process, I think that is when you can anticipate there being joy in the outcome. Yeah. I think if you kind of buck that journey the whole time and resent it and are angry through it and why me, when you do get to that end result, your hopes are kind of dashed because you're like, this isn't what I thought it was going to be.
Yeah. Because
the end result does not cultivate the gratitude. The journey cultivates gratitude.
Yeah.
And so it's all about the journey and what you're doing, the hard work that you're doing on the inside.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you are in transition,
there's hope.
If you know that transition is coming and you want to know how to handle it, we are here for you. We are here
for you. Yeah, man. It is an amazing thing to really learn how to enjoy the process. And I've heard it since I was 17 years old. And I'm 31 now. And I'm just now starting to understand what that really means. And so if you haven't got a hold of it yet, give yourself a break. It's going to take some time. It's going to take some maturity.
Yeah.
And it's going to take some life lived to really get it and to really enjoy it and to love it and to, expect it. Because it's going to happen. And the longer you can, or the quicker you can get, I do not have to be in control. Man, it's going to bless your life. It really will. So.
Yeah, and we started this by saying that we began this journey, this dream, this thing that we believe God put in our hearts at 18 and 19 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And here we are at 31, and we are just beginning, just hitting the tip of the iceberg of what we believe God was really getting at. So through the transition, we're not speaking from the end of it saying, we're done with transition, it was so hard, and so good luck to you. We're still very much so in the middle, and expect we will be for a long time.
Yeah.
And it's okay.
It's great.
It's okay.
But that's it, y'all. We hope you guys got something helpful from this.
Yeah.
I'm very grateful. Thank you, Taka and Natalie, for giving us this opportunity to share our heart about living in transition. So, love you guys. Please feel free to comment. We'd love to hear from you. If you guys have any helpful tips, we love them.
If you have been in transition and you're really good at it,
yep,
let us know how you did it.
All right, guys. Love you so much. See you later.